Shannon, there's no bigger or better pathway to the first team than the under-21s at any football club. There's been an influx of new signings over the summer at the Albion. Could you tell us which of the new players you'll be working with and which, just go straight to the first team and without you really dealing with them?
Yeah, so that's very fluid for us. In terms of coming into 21's group this year, we've got Adrian Mazzulu. He will spend a lot of time probably playing in the 21's group, but day-to-day training, heading over with the first team when required. I think that's a really common thing for us here, is that every morning I'll even meet with Crofty or Fabian and discuss how the players are doing, what's their requirements for today, and we work really hard to ensure that the majority of players spend as much time as they can with the first team, and that the manager gets to see everybody where he can. But Mazzalou will be the first one, and then the rest I think is based upon us being flexible on the loan options that come in and how open-minded we are for that. How good is the option that maybe we can't turn it down for the player at that given time. And then the manager's requirements, but he's the main one where maybe the fans won't know too much about, who spent a bit of time at Vitesse last year, and a 19-year-old wide player who will come into 21s this year.
Yeah, because in the old days there was pressure, wasn't there, to get people through the system and get them ready. There's less pressure now, there's more patience, is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's certainly here we try and be as agile as possible. So we have, in terms of the pathway, the 21s programme, Gordon and his team with the loans pathway, and then our first team. And depending on what the player's circumstances are and what he needs to get better at, and how close to our first team is he, we feel we've got any given programme that can support the player and, as you say, allow us to be patient when to be patient, but also when the player's doing really well, we can get out of his way and let him go and do what he does. I think that's the key, is when they're doing well, get out their way, like Evan Ferguson, for example, or it might be, I know with Jack Hinchwood, he was quite methodical in the way that he made his way through the pathway from 8 all the way through, and then even we were very tactful in terms of his time with the first team, 21s, where he was getting his game time from, and then waiting obviously for Roberto to eventually give him his chance, which he did.
Everyone's treated as an individual, aren't they? It's more of a care approach, isn't it? Because I suppose everyone progresses at different stages and at different speeds, whereas I think, Paul, you referred to it there was once an expectation if you weren't in the first team on your 21st birthday, you were pretty much out of the door and you were disregarded, whereas now we give people more care. And I am one that fall into that category. I didn't make it until I was a little bit older. So it shows that some people are ready when they're young, like your Evans who burst through, and then other people it takes more time. Yeah,
definitely. I think also what is there's a far better programme for development at under 21 level. So for us, we try and enter every competition that's available to us. So what young players now have, they have the exposure of the EFL Trophy, where they play against League 2 and League 1 sides. There's a new competition coming in this year, the National Conference Cup, so that all 21 teams that get invited can play all National League teams. So it's another additional competition that allows us to test our players at senior level, but still at under 21 level. So it's buying them a little bit more time, but it's also giving them a flavour of senior football. And also allows, I suppose, our loan pathway, other first team managers who are looking for players, potentially maybe not for this window but for next window, an opportunity to come and see a young player in a senior environment without necessarily all the pressures that come with a senior environment. So I think you're right, Ben, it allows the players more room for manoeuvre. It allows us to take a bit more time with them, but again, be more strategic about our development in what competitions we're playing them in, what do we need to expose them to, and how much of a hurry are we in with any given individual.
And I know that we progressed really well in the AFL Trophy last year, and it was quite special for the boys and yourself. How important are those evenings as far as the learning curve are for the group?
I think they're vital. That you try and value every competition, but if I was to be honest, it's the most important competition. because like not everybody of course is going to play in our first team, and still the 21s game on a PL2 tomorrow night v West Ham will look pretty different to what a League 2 game will look like. So it's really, really hard for a scout, a manager at those levels to come and picture what a young player is going to look like in a senior environment. So first of all, it gives that realism, but it's a different education because obviously for me, I'm trying to prep Premier League players and hopefully Champions League players. So the preparation and development model looks very different. We try and work on a high level of tactical elements and technical elements that can allow the players to perform at Premier League level. But the set of attributes and decision-making processes that is required at the levels where their probably first loan's going to go doesn't always get touched on along the academy pathway. So those games really highlight to our young players the foundations of what being a professional is, because you probably see those foundations, those brilliant basics at League 2, League 1 level more often, and those things are the things that can hurt us when we go and play against senior sides. The decision making, the choices, the when, the where, the how. So those games mean that the players can't hide away from those choices and those decisions, those senior stuff.
Yeah. Last season you talked a lot about the under-21s mirroring the Roberto De Zerbi first team in terms of approach and style of play. And is the same true of Fabian Hürzeler's first team? Are you in the process now of making the under-21s play and function like the senior team does, or will, I should say?
Yeah, I think that was a conscious decision from us. I think when Roberto first came, his style was really unique. And it wasn't necessarily a traditional 4-3 or any style from a principal perspective that we'd seen before. But because the model of having young players in our team is so strong here, that pathway and that demand for young players and the demand for the academy to produce young players will always be there. So where we kind of came from it is that if we don't give the players a head start to this very unique style, we're failing them. So that when a debut for a young player is stressful enough, so at least the thing we can do is ensure that when they go and play at the Amex or wherever their debut is, they haven't got to think about style, principles, because they're just going to do what they always do. We felt that will give them the best chance. And during Roberto's time, we had a huge amount of players involved, whether it be training, matchday squads, or achieving their debuts. And on reflection, we feel that was a good decision.
But will you repeat that decision with the new manager? Is it the same process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had a fair bit of time with Fabian, and he's been fantastic with me and helped me understand how he wants to play. He's involved me in a lot of the first team training during pre-season, so that I can get a grips of what he's after, when he's after it, and what the team should look like. And where that helps us is it means that I can educate the under-21 players of what he requires. So I think ultimately at any level, what gets players in the team is the ability for them to give the manager what he wants. And if I can understand what he wants, and I can help the under-21s understand what he wants, then hopefully it gives them the best possible chance to go and perform.
Of course, in Germany, in German football, it's absolutely routine for all the teams to operate that way, isn't it? So it would be natural for him to want you to develop the under-21s in a way that helps the first team directly in terms of style of play.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
When we're talking about sort of the difference between how Roberto does it and how Fabian does it, they're not vast differences, are they? They're slight. It's we're not sort of turned into a long ball team overnight. We like to try and keep a pathway of managers of a similar style. Obviously, like you say, everyone's unique in their approach to games and approach to football. But you will be implementing just small changes to your squad, won't you?
Yeah. So because I'm still in the place where it's about getting individuals through. So the structure of the team will be based around helping our best young players perform. But you're right, Glenn. I think you'll see some similarities between the in-possession principles from what I can see. Fabian will have quite a clear out of possession style too, and that's something that we're probably making our biggest adjustments to from a 21s group. There'll still be a dominance of possession, but our main block of work in terms of implementing Fabian's style and identity on the under-21 squad has been around counter pressing, next action, and what we do against the ball. And that, I think, for me as an under-21 head coach, I think that's one of the privileges and the advantages is you get to work with lots of different head coaches, and you get to sit back and learn and find different ways of, the complexity of, all the tactical work that goes into a Premier League side. It's my job. I couldn't possibly, one, deliver that to the letter because it's not my idea, and two, the level of player is slightly different, and every player, as we spoke about earlier, is in a different place. My job is to try and take the best bits, take the key bits and the things that I feel will be imperative to them when they go over, and then add the layers of trying to educate a more comprehensive education. Because again, although we're aiming for Premier League, someone's first loan could be at League Two. So how we bridge that so that we have a bit of a mantra of no surprises. So when a player leaves our 21s program, we don't want no surprises, or he should not be in a situation that he's never been in before, to the best that we can, whether it be
apart from the training ground.
Apart from the training ground, yeah, and the spa.
I mean, Jack, I guess you mentioned Jack Hinchelwood. That would be an example of about as smooth as a transition could be, wasn't it? Because you mentioned that he was methodical about it. He seemed to glide through all the levels, and then when he arrived at first team level, it just seemed completely natural to him. I guess that's the dream transition, isn't it? A Jack Hinchelwood transition. For sure.
And I think with Jack, from a development perspective, he's got an incredible mentality. So he's got something that hasn't come from us. It's come from his family, his football education, and how he spent the last 18 years of his life. Because he thinks like a senior player, first and foremost. The bit where I think maybe we might have helped is playing him in lots of different positions. But again, that's all well and good in theory, but, seeing Jack on the grass, the type of kid that he is, if the manager is talking to somebody else on the other side of the pitch, Jack's listening just in case it's him. So Jack would never envisage that that his position would change, so to speak, to a fullback. But I can assure that he's listening to any information that's going to the fullback in case it's him, because that's how he thinks.
You mean in case he ends up playing there sometime?
Yeah.
Right.
Would you say that he's been one of your easier projects because of his mentality and what his family have given him?
Yeah, for sure. Because with Jack, and out of all the common themes in the top players that we've had come through the system, Jack, either tell him something once and it's done, or he does something that you haven't told him and it works. Because he finds a solution.
Thinks for himself.
Yeah, he's got a smell for the game. He understands the tactical demands upon him in that moment, and he can find a solution.
And is that quite hard to find for young lads to recognise and think for themselves at such a young age?
Yeah. Again, because there's a huge amount of pluses for an academy system. But one of the things that makes it tricky is that everything is done for them. So sometimes, without meaning to, we think for them. So you have to constantly check yourself and pick the moments where they have to find a way. Because as soon as they leave myself and Gary or Mikey, for example, they might not have someone who's going to look at their clips with them. So how do they start to navigate through lots of time on their own, dealing with their own thoughts, their own reflections, without help? So then, when we get to 21s, we try and be as strategic as we can about when we help, how we help, what we allow them to just find out on their own. But with Jack, you didn't have to do any of that because it was just in his mentality.
What's the most common thing that stops a player at your level? In other words, what's the flaw that's most difficult to overcome? Because just as a spectator, it looks to me like it's decision making is perhaps the hardest thing to teach. Is that right?
Yeah, it's it's mentality. It's to do with their mentality for sure. I think sometimes expectation, self-awareness, understanding where they're at, understanding where they want to get to, and then the key is how you get there. So every player understands where they want to be, but they don't quite understand where they're at. Because I think when you can truly look in the mirror as any young player, and be truly critical of yourself, but not in a detrimental way, and you don't hide from your flaws, you have a really good chance. Jack was his own biggest critic. Same for Evan. Even now in our first team, you'll say, "Oh, Jack thought you were good the other day," and he'll go, "No, there's more." So again, that type of thought process is rare, because ultimately we're working with the minority, and the common themes with that minority that are elite performers is how they think about the game and how they think about themselves, and that constant drive to be the best you can be and never think that enough is enough.
You mentioned the word expectation. Is that the player's expectation or the people around them?
Both, because I think one feeds into the other. I think what's really clear to see now along the football pyramid, or in the world of football, there are good players everywhere. From Conference South upwards, for example. And, what we do here is, there may be a Premier League debut for somebody. That doesn't necessarily mean they're a Premier League player.
No.
And their first opportunity might come at, let's say, League One, for example. But it's really hard for the player sometimes to understand, well, my debut is here. I've been training with Premier League players, but my entry level at senior level for a loan is still here. How does that work? And in their mind, sometimes that's hard to comprehend.
How difficult is it managing the people around the player? Because, like you say, they'll go home to them or they'll speak to them, whatever, and they're constantly pushing their opinion on the player. Yeah. So when we see the boys that have come through, we've talked about the people around them, like Jack's family, like Evan's family. How important is it to have that inner circle and that infrastructure that I suppose that talks sense and has a perspective of reality?
Yeah, it's crucial, because they're only here for, as I said, they arrive at 8:30 and maybe they're done by 3 p.m. So there's a large chunk of time.
It's a long day.
It's got longer.
Yeah, it's got longer, isn't it, Cliff? And I think what we forget is, and sometimes I forget, I can name a team, and then by the time I've left the meeting room, the lads that are not playing are on the phone, and they're having to explain why they're not in the team to everybody, and everyone's. I think what we're learning is now a young player has a huge support system, but also a huge weight on their shoulders. One, because of social media. Two, their agents, representatives, and then sometimes, a player might be in a situation where his family depends upon this young man, and sometimes I forget I'm just naming a team, but I've now just caused someone an issue where he's going to explain to maybe 30 people who are waiting for him to say I'm in or I'm not in. Then when he says no, I'm not playing, well, why are you not? Why? You're not working hard enough, and then it just spirals, and it becomes a difficult place for a young player, especially if they're over. They've joined us from overseas and they're on their own. And again, there is a common theme, certainly from the players that are relatively, I suppose, not local, but where the football club, the family, and the agent are all on the same page. That's really, really useful. Not always the case, but really, really useful. because then the support system is strong, and the message is stronger, and it speeds up the process of development, because you're not having, as a coach, I'm not having to convince 20 people of my view. I'm only convincing one person, because all the other messages are the same.
Yeah, because it's a very tantalising place to be, isn't it, for a young player? And it would be easy for anyone playing regularly for the under-21s to convince themselves they're on the cusp. They're on this is the stepping stone, and they give it another 6 months and they'll be training with the first team and playing regularly in the Premier League. And of course it doesn't work like that. But you can understand why that idea would get into their heads, can't you, really? For
sure. And I do think, because of this body of work we have as an academy now over the past 8 years or so, statistically you are far more likely to succeed as a professional footballer if you join Brighton. There's no doubt about that. If I can use an example of the year the 21s got promoted to the PL2 Div 1. In that team was Rob Sanchez, Max Sanders, Aaron Connolly, Victor Guy Corres, Ben Barkley, Danny Mandrew, Steve Alzati, Tom Dallison. Not involved that day, but came up because they were injured, was Ben White, was Jason Malumbi.
That's a good group of young players, that, isn't it?
And people say that, when you're working with a group, you're only working with one or two. I disagree. For us here at Brighton, it's been groups of players that have gone on to be successful, because it's everyday training.
Because they drive each other.
They push each other, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you invest in your work within the group, standards, habits, every day, from a productivity perspective, more come out. And they may not all get to Premier League, of course not. But you look around the footballing world now, there are players scattered around that have been part of our academy.
And yeah. I suppose that point you made there, you're only working with a couple. Maybe if you're working in League 2 or League 1, then the fallout below that isn't huge. But when you're in a Premier League academy, the fallout below that, you've got the world to fall out onto almost, haven't you? Not only our leagues in England and Scotland and everywhere else, you've got Europe, you've got South America. The fallout is huge for them, isn't it?
Well, Alex Ferguson used to keep a list of ex-Man United apprentices and where they'd gone.
He's got his scroll here.
Well, yeah. And do you know what? He was almost as proud of that as he was of his list of trophies. He'd say to you, do you know we've had 82 players now have got professional careers at other clubs, outside of Manchester United. And he was so proud of the fact that if you went and trained at Manchester United as an apprentice, you may not make the first team, but it gave you a chance of having a career in the professional game. So that would be something for this club to be proud of as well, and it sounds like you're proud of it.
Very much so. I think, I joined as a 21th member of staff, so this is my 8th season, and the pride that you take every Saturday texting everybody good luck that have been through your system. I'm now at a stage where it takes a while, and you're checking on the scores. But one, as an academy, it's something we're really proud of, because ultimately, what makes being a 21s member of staff so rewarding is the impact you can have, because it's the last step before senior football, and if
it's the final step for all.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you get it right, you can. I always try and use the point that, a great player is coming through whether you're there or not. That's happening. But you can make a really big impact at getting average to good, and it's that bracket of player where you as a football club can make vast differences in your groups of players, and it's that large group, because obviously the minority, is the great.
But even the great at that age, that vulnerable age we're talking about, needs guidance.
True. Yeah. If I look up, so Evan and Jack are slightly different because of what we spoke about their mindset. Ben, probably, who's done incredible. The world of football helped him along his way in terms of his League 2, League 1, Championship, Premier League for us, then Premier League for Arsenal. Rob Sanchez is probably a really good example of where, and I don't say it's like, I think he only comes through at Brighton. Because
the people around him.
Because of people around him. And that's where the experts in this particular part of the player's development is really important. And then as you said earlier, being patient, having caring people here too, that understand the person as well as the footballer, because that's huge. Then allow the ones that may not get through anywhere else to come through here. So there's lots of different facets to why not just a certain type of player finds his way through the pathway. It's that we're ready to develop anybody and give the required time that they need.
It's funny because Evan and Jack are like, they're the perfect academy graduates, aren't they? They've gone from playing in our academy, you've prepared them correctly, and they're first team Premier League regulars now. Whereas Ben and Rob, they're the perfect example of the loan system, aren't they?
Yeah.
They had to work, maybe a little bit harshly, they had to work harder, but they had to put themselves out there a little bit more. Like you say, Ben went to the likes of Peterborough, Leeds, which went extremely well. Then you look at Rob, he went and made mistakes at Rochdale, and that made him really grow up with it.
Yeah.
And that was a huge decision-making learning curve for Rob, wasn't it? That League Two players at Rochdale, when he fluffed one, it cost people money, and it was important. They needed to stay in the division. It all boils down to sort of, and this is the reality of playing Premier League 2, where everyone on the field is pretty comfortable in their academies and their contracts and things like that. When you're put out against real world football in your League 2s and things, and it matters to people to send kids to school, to put money on the table, to pay your bills, your mortgage, things like that. And that was a real, I think it was a shock to Rob, wasn't it? I mean, because he made quite a few mistakes along the way, and where he's very much one where he doesn't necessarily care, which is really important for a goalkeeper. You've just got to brush it off. I made a mistake, hey-ho. But obviously the team in front of him cared more than possibly the lads that he was playing with here did.
Yeah, I think that comes down to I'm really my view is that in youth development, you can't, certainly in the professional phase, you can't really coach somebody unless you know them. You can't. And once you know somebody and you're working with them every day, then you need to really understand what they need next. So for Rob or for Ben, our program couldn't give them what they needed. So we have to recognise that really early, and then turn to, it was David Will at the time, for Gordon now, and go, well, the 21s program, the games program, the day-to-day training, the going back and forth with the first team, that's ticked loads of boxes, but there's a couple of boxes here that now we can't give them. So we think now the only thing that can help them get to where they need to get to next is a loans pathway. And Rob was 100% that. He had to go and feel what it was like to make errors in front of people, to be accountable for his actions, and eventually to mature and grow.
And Ben the same, because I can actually, funnily enough, remember Ben stepping into first team training, and he would always try and step in front of you. And I said, "Do you always do that?" And he was like, "Yeah, I always step in front." Because it was annoying me. I was. Do you know what I mean? He stepped in and he kept nipping in front of me. I was like, but what if on the one occasion you don't quite time that right? I get turned and I'm in on goal, and he's like, "Oh, it's just what I do." But again, that's where you have to go out and you have to learn, because I'm sure you're going to sit him down and go through his clips, and the likes of Gary Dicker are going to do that in the under 21s league. Yeah. But it doesn't really matter when you do it at Ellen Road. All of a sudden it matters a little bit more.
Yeah, I think when you can truly add high consequence to their choices, then they then start to understand when they should do what they should do, and then it really questions the solutions they have when they play their game. Because as you said there, Muzza, like doing one thing in the PL2 against a 17-year-old It's very, very different to doing it in the Championship. And it starts to then allow them to be accountable. And for us as a football club, really start to judge and assess them under real pressure. Because when you look at a player's actions, for me, I try and look at how the level of the action. Is it Premier League? How often do you see it? And then when pressure comes, does it falter? So if it's Ben stepping in front of somebody, well, that's great in training. It's great in the PL2.
And it's great when he gets it, when he nails it.
But when you do it and it hurts you, do you continue to do it and make the same mistakes, or do you change? And the best players have the ability to change and adapt their thinking based upon what they're seeing in any given moment.
They learn the lesson.
But also it's about Ben's bravery as well. It's not becoming scared of doing that, because it's what he was about.
Yeah.
But just getting the timing right and picking the right moments to do it, rather than all of the time.
Yeah.
We're talking a lot about players taking the jump, the transition to the next level. What about under-21 coaches? The reason I mention that is because Lee Carsley's just been given the job as interim manager of England. Gareth Southgate, before him, progressed from under-21 level to England senior level. A lot of people are very happy to see Lee Carsley get that job, and he's a candidate to get it full time, potentially. So, do you think we've got more respect now for under-21 managers? We've got a better sense of coaches, a better sense of what they actually do and how much they help the first team?
I think so, and the profile manager is changing, younger, more different ideas. The want for a style is very much on, I think, owners and chairman's minds about the style that you play. And I do think that being a 21s head coach, apart from 3 p.m. on a Saturday, it's a fantastic education for any coach. For me in my role, I would have a watered down version, because I was still, recruitment, some media duties, picking a team, contracts. So there's lots and lots of elements. First team players coming down. So there's lots of elements of the role itself that is good preparation and good education. So I can certainly see why now people are turning to either younger coaches or coaches that have worked at under 21 level, for sure, because now the demand on a 21s team and coach and team of staff is pretty big.
Yeah, because in Germany and France and Spain and other countries, it's routine for under-21 coaches to make the next step and given the opportunity. But in this country, it's probably less common. So maybe if there's a bit more wisdom now about what a good starting point the under-21 job is, that can only be a good thing, can't it?
Yeah, and I think, again, one thing our football club does extremely well is succession plan and promote from within. So, if you look at our first team staff, whether it be Josh Hook, Alex Burrows, Sam Hudson, Crofty. There's a
can't think about Crofty. Was your assistant?
He was coming next, because again the togetherness of the football club and the closeness to the 21s group of staff and first team group of staff, because that is so close. The understanding of maybe what's required or the vantage point that you have again as a 21s member of staff is pretty close. So you can understand the demands of what you're trying to produce for, and again, because you have Premier players coming down into your group to train, to play, also you'll get opportunities to practice speaking to an elite player who thinks elitely, who's played at the top level, and again, really good exposure and education when you're 21 member of staff now.
Yeah.
Can you just run us through your journey at the club, Shannon?
Yes, so I joined originally in 2016 as head of academy goalkeeping. Simon Rusk was the 21s manager and Vic Bragg was the assistant coach. So we worked as a 3 for a year. I'd left Reading, where I was head of academy goalkeeping, but also assistant coach there. And then Vic Bragg went part-time in the January 2018, and Simon had asked me to be his assistant. We got promoted at the end of that season, and I stayed in that role until Simon left to go to Stockport. We had Andrew Crofts doing the overage player role, so me and Crofty took joint charge from when Simon left, I think about February to the end of the season. And then me and Crofty became the 21s head coach, and I became the professional phase lead, but we worked together. And because we had Dan Ashworth was our technical director at the time, he worked an in-possession and out-of-possession model. So I took in possession, Crofty took out of possession, but Crofty was the head coach. And then I think it must have only been another season went by. Graham Potter then leaves. Myself and Crofty step up to take the first team in between Graham and Roberto. Roberto then wanted Crofty to be part of his staff, and then I became the 21's head coach.
Quite a journey.
Yeah.
So you say that texting on a Saturday morning takes quite a long time. Have you got a rough list of how many players have made it in terms of becoming a footballer from your guidance?
Yeah, so would you like me to name them? Okay, so
I'm sure this is a very proud list.
Yeah, I'm going to go off the top of my head now. So
apologies to anyone who forgets.
Yeah, if it gets too long, I do apologise. So we'd look at Will Collar at Stockport, Ben Barkley at Carlisle, John Davis at Wrexham, who's just gone to Grimsby. We've got Christian Wharton, Jason Malumbi, Danny Mandrew, Max Sanders. We have Matthias Norman, Ben White, Henrik Bjordal, Anders Dreyer at Anderlecht. We have Tom Dallison, we have George Cox, Alex Cochrane at Birmingham, Mark Leonard now at Birmingham, Rob Sanchez, Steve Alzati, Victor Guy Corres, Leo Ostigard at Napoli. I think how many you got there, Mazza?
Jack, Evan, Did you mention Ben?
Jack, Evan, Ben, yeah.
I mean, obviously that there will be people that you have missed out because I put you on the spot with that, but that really does show how successful Brighton's academy is, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's really what having an academy is all about. Ultimately, you want people to come into your program, and you want them to leave a better person and a better footballer. And if they can go on and have careers around the world, and something for us is that we're really passionate about wanting to be renowned for producing young players, and that if you're a young player, you want to join Brighton because your chance of being a professional is far higher here than anywhere. And now I say we're at a place where we've got some evidence to call back upon and a body of work that we know works.
Well, I think that is the perfect moment to call this podcast to an end.
Yeah, this training ground as a magnet for young players, a place to come and develop and learn and go on to have good careers. That's a good advert for the club.